technology which is available at some place, they do not know what to do with that technology. For innovation to be successful, someone has to take an outer cost.
Because we get to be here in India when there's so much dynamism and so much happening and so much growth happening here.
To the distinguished panelists, but before we start this session, I'd like to highlight some of the key issues which India is facing in this initiative. Let me assure you that under the Prime Minister Modi, this is the best time ever we can have for innovation, incentivization or innovation building ecosystem. India for over last many decades had been working on science and technology, but this is a golden time. This time will never come back again to India. If India has to lead this system into the global arena as an international standard and with global partners, we should try to now push as much as FICCI. I am assuring you that from FICCI side, will work with government, academia and our international partners country in taking it forward. So some of the issues needs to be set up. The mentor networks are very important, where industry is going to play a very important role. We respect academic knowledge, but the mentoring in startup and incubation has to be led by industries and across sectors, across geographies. And with this, I'd like to invite the first panelist, first speaker, vibrant national leader the country ever have, Mr. K. Ullas Kamath, a joint managing director, a public listed company, Jyoti Labs Limited.
I said that we are just looking into a good ecosystem for mainly the startups and then small and medium enterprises. I'm a firm believer that country needs more of SMEs, and eventually SMEs will become bigger companies. And entire country today should be looking at creation of jobs for the needy people across the country, and SMEs are the people who generally create the jobs most of the times. The context in which I'll be talking to you today is that India is definitely the country to be looked up to for every kind of commerce. Indians, because of the knowledge, because of the literacy, because of the English speaking, it's easy to educate people. Most of the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities also. The technology which is available at some place, they do not know what to do with that technology, because for them, the finished product of a technology is getting a PhD out of that or making it successful at a lab level. And some of the technologies they live as a successful technology at a lab level. An entrepreneur or a small scale or a medium scale enterprise, he is getting into a commercial world, and he wants the best of the technology, which he do not know where such technologies are available. Even if he is having access to get into the technology, then he do not know where to get the money from, where to get the credit from, how to set up a factory, how to run a factory. So the passion is there to run, but there may not be means to take it to the next level. So the ecosystem, what we would be looking at as a small and medium enterprises for the country is that well-proven technology at lab level, which is required for the country, which is required for a common man, and it should be mainly for bottom of the pyramid customers, because rich people can always afford the best of the product available in the world. What we need today is a better product, a cheaper product, a faster product, an affordable product, which can go to the market, from the lab to the market, maybe less than a year's time. Such kind of a products, technology are available, abundant in every lab. So ecosystem, what we need to be looking at, which we are doing in a small scale, in our company, what we are doing is that if somebody have a technology, we give them a space in our factory to set up their project, And if it is viable for them, viable for us, we'll make them as an outsourcing agent, wherein we invest the money, we invest in machinery, we give them the support, whatever is required to become a businessman, and finally, we'll be extremely happy to say that, okay, he has become an ancillary unit for our company, and that's the way how we build it. So a businessman who knows how to do a business, he do not have a technology. A person who has a technology, he is not a businessman at all. So ecosystem, what we are trying to connect at Jyoti, at all the places wherever we are operating from 38 locations across the country, is that bringing idea could be anything, not necessarily just a product, even a process is a technology. Because a better productivity is a new process if somebody is bringing in. We are encouraging such things. So my experience has been that it is very easy to develop entrepreneurs. All they need is money, some technology, and what they have is good quantum of passion. And the way how they create employment, it will be much difficult for big corporate to create employment. So as Mr. Saxena said, we are in the right time, doing the right thing, and in line with the government's thinking. While Prime Minister can say, make in India, that's all what he can say. End of the day, it's our responsibility as responsible corporate citizens. At SME level, we should adopt Make in India. And our import has to reduce as much as possible. Our export has to increase as much as possible. That's the only way we can make this Make in India dream. It takes its own time. Nothing will happen in 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years, but we are going in the right direction. So we have taken some of the technologies from DRDO, doing extremely well. And what we could have spent 20 years in creating a product, they had created and they given in our hands, and we were able to commercialize it after taking the technology from their lab. So lab to the market, if it can be done through entrepreneurs, success is certain. It's only that all of us should have patience.
Company who had courage to acquire a global brand in India, which is Henkel. Mr. Kamath, under his leadership, has acquired the global brand Henkel, and his all 38 factories in India, where the employment is more than 90% are the rural women. You are the real legend. And not only this, on the vision of the Prime Minister and FICCI initiative, he is now donating it in Karnataka. We will be shortly announcing under his leadership as a FICCI startup ecosystem. Thank you, Mr. Kamath. Then to connect to the right industry, to develop further and to scale in the market, we have with us Mr. S. Radhakrishnan, who is a interface. He's one man, we have been working with him for the last several years, that he is very proactive in engagement, primary social benefit and homeland security. Mr. Radhakrishnan, before you start, I'd like to congratulate you on your success of DRDO, which has really been adopted not only by railways, by 4 ministries, and then many corporates, many NGOs, and many. Is like a fire in Swachh Bharat. Your experience and how your experience has been working with IC Square in building an innovation ecosystem for DRDO, and how from here what is the way forward?
Thank you, Narakar. Just let me first to thank the organizers giving me the opportunity to share my experience. Fortunately, it is not a PowerPoint presentation. So, in the innovation space, today everybody has been talking about innovation. We wanted to, each one has to share their experience. Those who have tried it out, wanted to do something different. We learned a lot of lessons. We would like to share our experience. I would like to share my experience of how to create an innovation ecosystem in the DRDO. Narakar has been talking about the success of biodigester. For you to tackle, you need 2 people. For you to make clap with 2 hands. But for FICCI, I don't think DRDO would have been in this space where the biodigester has been licensed to more than 60 industries in the country. So we have when I see the panel, I found that almost every one of them who are in the panel, I have interacted, was a knowledge partner. IC Square has been a knowledge partner to institutionalize the ATTACK program, that is Accelerated Technology Assessment Commercialization, which is the joint initiative of DRDO and FICCI. And the program was conceived, Mr. Len Denton was in the program manager of IC Square. So I was happy to see that all the stalwarts who helped us in creating an ecosystem in Ministry of Defense are here to share our experience. I have few points and learning experiences, some what we have done and what we need to do to make this a reality. For the innovation to be successful, someone has to take an out-of-box thinking. It is not a conventional thinking is not going to make an innovation to happen. Some out-of-box thinking is essential, and that out-of-box thinking has to be supported by the leadership. If these two things happen, I'm sure that innovation will thrive in any organization. That's one thing everyone has to realize it. Think out of box. Don't go by the threaded route. Nothing is going to happen. You have to take the challenge. You will face the difficulties. Those difficulties have to be maneuvered, overcome, and then you will succeed in the end. Why I'm trying to tell, to create an innovation ecosystem in Ministry of Defense, nobody thought it is that easy, because we are bound to have a set of rules. We have a Ministry of Defense, security, everything is given to us as a requirement. We have to work to meet those requirements, I think. And in innovation system, innovation doesn't thrive in those closed environment. We need to have an open mind, discuss, engage with the different people. When we are trying to do that commercialization internal to the DRDO, it is not that we are not done before attack program. We were doing it in-house, inside the four walls. So what we are doing it essentially, we are talking to our own supply chain every time. So your knowledge, your limitation, your problems, everything is limited to a very few number of people. And being a Minister of Defense, access to a defense lab is a very difficult thing. Today morning, we are listening to CEO Brahmos talking about Mishra. We had Dr. Kalam's museum was inaugurated, but we can't allow public to come inside because we are located in a security environment. We have to take permission and then only people can access. Now they are trying to find out the mechanism, how do we move it out of the security zone so that his experience, Dr. Kalam's, what his contribution can be enjoyed and seen by everybody else to emulate. So these are the practical problems what we do when you want to do an innovation system in a defense establishment. That's the first challenge we faced. When you are looking out for what are the various schemes available, how do we do that, then we come across number of innovation programs which are going in the country. It's not just FICCI, we have looked into CII, we have looked into various grassroots innovation of IIM Ahmedabad doing that one. We have seen many cases. What we have noticed is, in everywhere, they were trying to identify the key innovations which have come out of these various institutions, the innovators, and then try to identify those investors or the industries which are interested in such innovations, to bring them under one roof. After that, you expect the fire, because you're dry cotton and fire is close by, you expect somewhere the fire to take place, and the deals were taking place. There was no compulsion for FICCI or anybody to make a deal to take place. Then we requested FICCI. It doesn't help us, because these innovations, what we talk about DRDO, is something, these technologies have been developed, tried it out, it's working in many other defense equipments and systems. We also realized, and Dr. Prahlada and we conceived that program, technology is how do you use it. More than 70% of the technology what you use, you cannot call it as a military technology. And if it is get bogged down into the military, the market is very limited, very niche. And we in DRDO will know the defense market is a very sporadic market. If anybody is trying to do business only as a defense as the only market, he is going to have a terrible problem. He cannot survive. The commercial industry cannot survive. You need to de-risk it so that you should find appropriate market for those technologies to be exploited in the commercial space. The requirements of commercial space are different. In defense technology, the performance, accuracy, ruggedization, all those are the parameters under which you want to do it with the technology. Price may not be that sensitive. It's important, but it is not that sensitive, especially when national security is concerned. Whereas when you take this technology to a commercial space, it is the performance plus price. Without the price, if it is not market competitive, you cannot be succeed. However good the technology is, nobody is going to take this technology to the commercial space. That's what I say, the businessman who wants to invest in this technology has to see a business case for him to invest in this technology. If there is no business case, however good the technology is going to be of no use. So that's what we learned. Every technology commercialization we did, starting from mosquito repellent, which we did into the Jyoti laboratory, to the biodigester, to including that explosive detection kit, which Len Denton was instrumental in taking the technology to US. People thought that the Indian different DRDO technology first time got commercialized to a US company. Today the US company has now taken to the next level, evaluated, got the US Homeland Security approval. Now it has become a standard NATO part. Any Navy SEALs they wanted to go, they can just take it and buy it and then go there. So what I'm trying to tell is that this technology commercialization, when we started the program, we wanted to make it as a global program. So we had to create systems internal to DRDO so that it goes through the process. Once the technology is given to the FICCI, then the sky is the limit. We can talk to anybody, and then wherever the market is there, we will try to take the technology to the market. We also see that there are a lot of challenges. The lessons what we learned is when we try to take a technology from lab to market, there's a big problem. That's a major thing because we are now talking about scaling up that. Is there a possibility of scaling the technology to the volume you need? So especially when you just to talk about that, Ullas Kamath is there, maybe you can add mosquito repellent. We developed it for the mosquito repellent for the defense market because the requirement are to have a long-lasting effect. Conventional thing is 3 hours, whereas the soldier gets out of his barracks, comes back 8 hours. Can you have a repellent which can give 8-hour duration? Nothing was available in the market. That's what DRDO got into that one. So now this not a military technology. Can't be just to take it to the commercial space and then everybody went on to get the benefit of this. So when we went to the industry, now the challenge is how do we produce those volumes required, repeat and batch after batch, maintaining the same quality. That is the challenge. So that means a lab to a commercial market, that's where the challenge we are facing now. So these are the lessons which you have learned, maybe that we need to establish if the technology can move through our technology business incubators or technology business accelerators, TPIs and TBAs, which are the thing which made that Austin to change, for the US ecosystem to change. We have not created those ecosystems here. We are now struggling. So now at least we have to ensure that one day we create these institutions which provide the support and migrate the technology in a painless way into the market. They are also going to tell where do we focus and how do we do that. And it's who is the stakeholder? If you look at it, the real stakeholder for this to succeed is the government. Because today even the minister we are morning we are listening, we have heard him, Mr. Gadkari ji, he was mentioning about what is the priority of any government. The priority of any government is to remove poverty. If poverty to be removed, you have to create employment. So that's why now the government is talking about Startup India, Digital India, all these things have got a huge amount of aggregating capability. It's not that the programs are not there. Now the government is championing it. The Prime Minister is talking about it. The entire world is talking about it. So it has got an aggregating effect, and everyone is now trying to come out with their own innovation schemes. So the important thing is now we need to ensure that there has to be some kind of a convergence should take place and create those systems which need to be established. Otherwise, there will be too many things which is happening which we are not able to measure the output of that one. And there are a lot of avenues available. The other day we have been talking about that offsets. That's one thing which I thought is relevant today to talk about that. In every one of this one you need investment. Where the investment is going to come from? Is it necessary everything has to come from the government and something can be culled out from the various other schemes which are available? So then the proposal, there was a proposal about acquiring technology. We got it in part of the offset program. But how are you going to get the skills? Who is going to give you the skills of taking those cutting edge next generation technology which are going to acquire? How do you going to train them? If you do not have the workforce to handle the technologies, what is the point of having the technology itself? So this is the key issue which we need to look into that one. If you don't get those skills into those people, And to handle those cutting-edge technologies, the technology has got no use. You may be okay in the lab, but you cannot just take it up to the levels which you want. Can we provide incentives to those areas? Can we provide investment in the TBI, TBAs can be eligible under that one? There are a number of schemes available, not necessarily defense officer, the government is, the entire nation is importing many things. Can something can be taken to this road? Similarly, like tax incentives. Can't we give some tax incentives? The CSR fund is also being talked about 2%. Can an investment in TBI and TBA, ultimately the government is the thing, can that be considered as a CSR activity? Because you are creating an ecosystem to enable employment generation. You are not an employee, you are creating employment to many people. If you remove unemployment, you go to a job, you get one job. If you create an entrepreneur, you get 100 jobs. So that's a model which you have to see. So I will rest my case at this point of time. If maybe during the course we can interact further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Radhakrishnan, and I think we appreciate your input. We would like to highly recommend on that. Moving forward, ladies and gentlemen, we have a managing director, chairman cum managing director of a National Research Development Corporation, NRDC. And NRDC is a technology commercialization arm of CSIR. We have Dr. Purushottam, who had a wide experience in technology, handling technologies from the public labs, and he'd like to share his own experience that over last 1 decade we know Mr. Dr. Purushottam work, how he had built an ecosystem with international leveraging and the benefit of NRDC. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Saxena, for giving me this opportunity. My fellow panelists on the dais and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor and a privilege for me particularly and NRDC in general. See, NRDC is one of the organizations in the government setup connecting these dots which leads to incentivizing innovation ecosystem. There are many agencies, organizations in the government setup which are really promoting this innovation ecosystem. And NRDC is one of them, and I would say it is the oldest and largest system in the government which promotes innovation, entrepreneurship, and startups. There is one question I think many entrepreneurs would like to know. I wanted to become an entrepreneur. From where do I get this knowledge, the information, the technologies? Is there any agency, is there any organization which can help me? I would say definitely an organization exists in the country. One such organization is NRDC. NRDC was established in the year 1953 in this country, where I think that time even nobody thought of what is intellectual property right. And NRDC was given that mandate to promote intellectual property rights in the year 1953. But whereas the Patent Act, which has come into existence in India, is only 1970. So that is the great grand visionary of our government, which thought intellectual property rights, technology transfer, technology commercialization is going to play a major role in creating employment and wealth. And it has established an organization like NRDC as early as in 1953. You see, when entrepreneurs identify technologies from labs, as morning many of the learned speakers were talking, the technologies always pass through several valleys of death before they reach the market, before they become mature. We call them in our technology management literature, we call it a technology valley of death or the commercialization valley of death. NRDC was established precisely to fill those gaps, to help entrepreneurs to overcome or to cross over the technology valley of death and the commercialization valley of death. What do we mean by technology valley of death? Technology valley of death means if your technology which you have identified for commercialization has not been fully developed with respect to its optimization of the process parameters or its application or the know-why aspects, not only know-how aspects, the know-why aspects also one should know at the time of development so that the technology will be successfully commercialized. The dimensions or the variables involved for crossing the technology valley of death is, that is what the scale up. What Dr. Radhakrishnan has mentioned, you need to scale up the technologies which are developed in the lab scale before they become a commercially successful technologies. If you don't scale it up in a stepwise manner, say for example a lab scale, bench scale, a semi-pilot, pilot scale, or semi-commercial and commercial scale, these are all the value chain in the technology value chain. The technology will pass through. If you don't scale up these technologies step by step and finally take it to a commercial scale, what happens? The technology may die because of a lot of unknown factors. So that is why there is a need for scale up. NRDC helps scaling up those technologies. Rather, we provide financial assistance for scaling up the high risk technologies. Not only scaling up, you need to validate, you need to develop a prototype. You need to validate the product in the field. You need to carry out a clinical trials or field trials. Unless you do these things, whatever technology we develop and transfer, they are likely to be a failure in the commercial space. So to fill all this technology valley of death gaps as well as commercialization valley of death gaps, commercialization valley of death means, for example, if you don't carry out a market survey for your technology or a product, the technology again is very likely to fail again. Without knowing the depth of the market, one should not venture into taking this technology into a market. So NRDC also provide assistance to young entrepreneurs or startups or companies where they would like to commercialize new technologies. NRDC provides a market research report, a techno-economic feasibility report. It also prepares a basic design engineering package which tells what should be the viable capacity of the plant, what are the plant and machinery. So these are some of the very important value-added services NRDC providing for both labs as well as entrepreneurs for incentivizing this innovation ecosystem. NRDC over the years has licensed or transferred or facilitated transferring more than 5,000 technologies. Most of them are in the bottom of the pyramid, particularly in the agriculture sector, and assisted inventors and individual inventors particularly by filing more than 1,700 patents by spending money from NRDC. If the inventor has got a technology and idea, they can always approach to NRDC. Yes, I have this idea, whether it is patentable. If it is patentable, NRDC can help filing a patent for me and protecting it and maintaining it. Yes, NRDC will do that. It has done so far 1,500, 700 patents. It has been filed by NRDC. So at this point of time, I would like to stop at this point of time, and probably the panelists and others, when they raise questions, I would like to add more my experiences to the problems which you are facing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Purushottam, for sharing your experiences. A wonderful job done by NRDC in the national interest. Ladies and gentlemen, as you are aware that the US is leading the global, I think, index in research and development, innovation, startup, ecosystem. And we are very proud to have with us Mr. Chad Newberg, who is heading Trade and Technology Unit at US Embassy. I would request Chad to kindly share their success so far in their global market and how you seeing India as an opportunity in building a network between India and US research and development innovation ecosystem.
I have to say that innovation in India are two of my absolute favorite topics to talk about because there's so much happening. I think speaking as a diplomat and speaking not just as an American diplomat, but for all my European and Asian colleagues that are here in New Delhi at this time, I have to say that we're kind of the envy of all our colleagues in the world because we get to be here in India when there's so much dynamism and so much happening and so much growth happening here. A lot of our colleagues in other countries in the world wish that they could be in India working with Indians on this very bright future that's ahead of them. So in that respect, I feel very fortunate to be here. I've been in India for about 6 months, and before this I was posted to the Russian Federation, which was an entirely different experience for an American diplomat these last few years. So it's good to be here. I think when we talk about the United States and India and innovation, I mean, lately the first name that comes to mind is the CEO of Google. I think most of us know Sundar Pichai was born and raised in Bangalore and came to the United States and is now one one of the leading voices in technology and innovation in the United States. In fact, I think he's planning to be here in December, and we'll meet with the Prime Minister within the next week or two. But it's not just Sundar. I mean, if you've ever been to Silicon Valley, if you've ever been to Boston or any of our other technology centers in the United States, you don't have to look far to see Indian Americans or Indian students that are in there working. And that's a tradition that has been long running and one that we're very proud of, and I think one that adds a lot of value to the United States and increasingly is adding more value to India. I think when we talk about incentivizing an innovation ecosystem, there are a lot of topics that we could talk about. I've heard some great things about SMEs. I've heard some great things about scalability and a little bit about patentability. But I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about IPR and IPR law. I think when you talk about innovation, one of the first things that you really have to think about is intellectual property rights. An innovator, somebody that has come up with a great idea or a great concept, one of the first things that they want to know is that they're going to be able to profit from their idea, and that's an incredibly important thing. In the United States, our highest median wage industries are defense, aerospace, energy, pharmaceuticals, and technology. Those are all vastly different sectors working in completely different parts of the economy. But the one thing that they all have in common is that all the industries are protected by a strong IPR set of laws and regulations. And that's something that we spend a lot of time talking with India about, working with India on. Right now, for those of you who are not aware, India is developing its first national IPR strategy. The first draft of this came out earlier this year in the spring. Comments and inputs were welcomed from the private sector and other governments, and I know a lot of people that are interested in India, a lot of companies weighed in on that with the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and we look forward to India releasing that first national IPR strategy, hopefully sometime later this year, early part of next year, and that's a great first step and one that we're really excited about, because when we talk about innovation, IPR is really one of the key things that we need to think about. And IPR is a huge topic that goes from strict patents to trade secrets to standard essential patents, and we could go into a very long discussion on that now, but I just wanted to point out for the group how thankful we are to be working with India on developing its IPR regime. Our U.S. Patent and Trademark Office has an actual attaché here and a staff of Indian lawyers that work directly with a variety of Indian government agencies to help grow India's IPR structure in such a way that it can adapt to the global economy while protecting intellectual property holders here in India and abroad. I guess one final note, I would say that one thing we're particularly proud of is that just last week, Sun Pharmaceuticals, one of India's major pharmaceutical manufacturers, won market access and approval for an exciting new anti-cancer drug that it will be marketing in the United States. And I think that one of my goals for this next year is to get Sun to come out and talk a little bit more about how important IPR is to them as an innovator here in India, not only here in India, but in its global market. It's just one key example. So with that, I'm gonna cease my comments and just thank you again for the opportunity to be with you today, and I look forward to the conversation.
Austin economy is moving on technologies, and here is one university, University of Texas, behind it, developing the state innovation system. Over to Sid.
Thank you, Nirkar. Appreciate the chance to talk this afternoon. I wanted to, rather than add or not to repeat what's said, but add to it a little bit in terms of ecosystems and protecting entrepreneurial growth in this country. So the Indian government, rightfully so, has decided that incubation networks are going to be the key to enterprise growth in India. And I think that's the right thing to do, and I think that it can be very impactful. So I want to talk a little bit about effective incubation and how it works, and the importance of having those kinds of platforms working properly to attract investment and markets to India for these startup companies. So incubators really have two main functions, and you can put a bunch of things inside these two, but basically their job is to reduce and manage risk, and their job is to provide access to capital and markets. Everything else we can talk about in terms of developing the entrepreneurs, in terms of intellectual property, in terms of market access, building teams, and making sure that you have competitive advantage in markets, all fills within those two things. So when you look at global markets, as we do with FICCI, is that our strategy has been that we work with enterprises on first having them go to the marketplace and focus on revenue. We do that because there's a great deal of risk in doing early stage investment from both within India and globally until you have some traction going in a market or a particular region that you're at. So we focus a lot on using the brand of University of Texas and using the brand of FICCI as a way to provide access to entrepreneurs that have good ideas. And it starts off with testing their ideas to make sure that there really is some market pain out there, that their technology is satisfying, and that there's a competitiveness in the technology, there's a uniqueness in it that warrants the efforts by the entrepreneur and by us into promoting their ideas. And unfortunately, many times we find out that the technology really has not enough differentiation in it that's going to really be competitive in the market. And sometimes we jokingly say it's hard to tell somebody that their baby's ugly. But in this case, sometimes we have to tell people that their technology doesn't work. So in order for an Indian entrepreneur from anywhere in India to reach a customer, say in California or Texas or something, there's a perceived risk and an actual risk that these potential customers have, and that is largely the unknown. Incubators, programs like the FICCI program with IC Squared at Stanford are really designed to not only identify the risks, but show how it can be managed and know that there's a team of professionals that are there in place to look after the interests not only of the entrepreneur, but of the potential customer and of the investor. You know, the capital markets flow around the world, and they come back out of the stream down to where they can create the most value, and that they can do it with the least amount of risk. So incubator networks, and how they work are really to help the enterprises and the entrepreneurs to be able to understand the environment of their markets and the capital markets in particular, and work to make sure that if I'm a consumer of technology in a country, and I have an Indian entrepreneur with a good solution, that I have confidence that the actual transfer of value can be done, it can be done effectively, and I can understand the risk so I know what I'm taking. That's the difference, and I think if you talk about why our programs have been so successful generating real revenue for companies both within India and globally, is that we know how to manage that risk, and we know how to help entrepreneurs minimize the exposure they may have to the risk that comes with technology venture. Technology venture are risky by nature, and there's a lot of failures, and but if it's properly managed, and we put the processes and practices are in place, that it can be very successful and be very high growth businesses. So in terms of markets and capital, again, any of the incubator network that is created and being created in India are going to have to be globally focused, because as large as the Indian market is, you have to be competitive globally. So you have to manage and provide support to enterprises a little differently than you do if you're strictly a domestic market-focused incubator. So the learning process for building a core of professionals inside of incubators that could really make the case and really stand with the entrepreneur and help them through these turbulent waters initially, really has to understand the dynamics of the global market. So we are very involved with FICCI in working with building management teams at incubators in India, not only existing ones, but also ones that are anticipated through the DIO program. And I think that that's going to increase the success. And remember, our enterprise, the failure rate for technology enterprises is probably 80–90% without support. And if you put them in an incubation environment, then that goes up to 50–60% success rate. So that's a tremendous difference in terms of success. So incubators survive and are affected by the networks that they establish, both within India amongst each incubator, but also globally. There's a huge network of incubators around the world. And the job of the incubation systems in India is to become a viable player in those networks. We have to find individuals that can provide mentorship about going into various markets. You have to be able to incentivize them. You have to be able to create a systematic approach to this. At IC Squared, we have a fellows network we've developed over the years of over 250 fellows, each of them experts in their own fields, and they're all over the world. We spent 15 years developing the initial parts of the fellows network, and now it's grown substantially. And we use those mentors, and they use the projects at IC Squared to be able to not only promote their own self-interest, but to help entrepreneurs. And I think part of any ecosystem that's being developed has to be creating networks of know-how networks in terms of technical expertise, business expertise, and those kinds of environments that cross over from country to country. In Austin, we developed what we call a Technopolis. There's a model called the Austin Technopolis where there's been a lot of publications read about it. But incubation by itself is local by nature, because you're usually funded by local governments because they want to generate jobs and they want to generate wealth in their communities. So the collaboration between incubators, academia, business, and the government is really important, not only their success in the incubation environment, but also their success when they exit the incubation network, because you don't want to put them out into a hostile business, local business environment. You have to create those collaborative efforts, the mentor networks, the capital that's there, the markets and the service providers. All of those work together to make the entrepreneurial success and have a successful community for entrepreneurs to go to and grow. So all of this is part of a viable incubation program. And if you're going to grow globally, the best way to do it is to do it through networks. Incubation now is matured to the point where the success of networks really drives the success of the incubator. And I think we've proven that here in India with our work, that those kind of networks have really provided a lot of value to us. So that's all I have to say.
Use alumnus to create mentors network through the university initiative and build corpuses and various programs, which I think we should give a recommendation to Ministry of HRD also on this issue. Ladies and gentlemen, moving forward, a very dear friend and a man who with IC Square earlier. Now he is a member of FICCI National Committee in Science and Technology Innovation, an international expert. Mr. Len Denton, who initiated a program, the two leading program for us, India Innovation Growth Program and DRDO. He has seen India for over the last 1 decade, and our question to Len is that what is under your vibrant innovation ecosystem experience, what you like India to do in next 1 to 3 years and next 3 to 5 years to achieve India as a global hub for innovation status? Over to Len Denton.
Well, thank you, Nirankar. It is a great pleasure to be here today. I want to say thank you to FICCI for inviting me to participate, to this esteemed panel. Thank you for allowing me to participate. I would like to speak specifically about tech startups. It's a very important aspect. One of the themes of this particular panel is lessons from across the world, and I'd like to hone in a little bit more on some of the things that Sid talked about with regard to the success and failure of startup technologies. In the United States, net job growth tech startups are responsible for almost 100% of net job growth year over year in the United States economy. So it's a very big deal to us, and there's a lot of research that goes on. So I would also just like to note that as a resident of the Austin area, how excited I am that Austin is now such a highly ranked go-to destination for tech startups. It places us on a similar par with other world-class development centers like Silicon Valley and Bangalore, and hopefully pretty soon we'll have exactly the same kind of traffic problems that they have in Silicon Valley and Bangalore. So anyway, I want to speak about the challenges for our tech startups. I was first introduced to India innovation in 2006, and I've been a fan of it ever since. Since then, I've had the privilege of looking at more than 1,000 Indian technologies through FICCI, working closely with them in both the India Innovation Growth Program and the DRDO Attack Program. I've learned a lot. And they've done a great job. FICCI and the organization that they've put together, and with the partnerships that they've had with DST and DRDO, have done a great job of driving forward the whole narrative of innovation in India. And it's just really early days today. What I would say is, looking back 10 years, one of the things that I was impressed with when Jim and I first started working on this program back in 2006 was there was just such an air of expectation. There was so much excitement around it, and it's only grown over the years. So I say that it's early days for Indian innovation. And what I mean by that is if you were to think of this in terms of a day, it's 6 a.m. in the morning for India. 6 a.m. in the morning. We're just getting started here in India. And you have the whole day ahead of you. If you look at the United States, we've got a bit of a head start. Yeah, that's true. It's probably early afternoon in the United States. And so, yeah, there's a bit of a head start. They've learned a lot, but they've also learned, they've made a lot of mistakes. And so one of the things I would like to do is I'd like to share and talk about those mistakes a little bit so that we as a group, as a team going forward can avoid some of those mistakes and improve the way that the success rates of Indian innovation. My goal is to help India to avoid some of the pitfalls that we've had in the United States. Now, it's still a great news story. Everybody looks at the United States as the model, but I do think that there's opportunities for improvement. There's a lot of research that's gone on about startups in the United States, and so what I'll talk about here in the next few minutes is some of that research, and it's focused specific. These statistics are specific to the United States, but they have some impact on how we go forward here in India. Research has shown, and I think Sid mentioned this before, the general research shows over the last 30 years that 90% of all startups fail. That's a huge number if you think about it. Think about that for just a moment. All the energy, all of the investment, all of the time, and all of the human capital that goes into a startup, and 90% of them fail. If you think about venture capital, those particular ventures fail on a 70% basis, typically. A venture capitalist in the United States is considered to be a success if 30% of their investments succeed. That's pretty interesting. And that's something that's really troubled me a lot as I think about startups and how to move that forward. I'd like to see that change. This also translates to more than $200 billion in lost investment every year in the United States, across the board, including some of the large organizations in the Fortune 200 as well. And there are Googles. You know, we keep doing this, and we always focus on companies like Google, which is a 1 in 10,000 kind of a situation. So this, as I said, this really, really bothers me as I think about how do we change this number? Think about what you could do and move this into the Indian context. I think we would like to do something different than to have a 1 in 10 success rate. I think we'd like to see something better than that. And so there are opportunities for us to follow or to take a bit of a different path, and that's what I wanted to chat with you about. As you look at the research, it shows that the #1 reason for failure is people build things, startups create things that the market doesn't want. So, said another way, tech startups fail 90% of the time, but only 10% of the failures of these startups is due to a technology-related issue. 90% of the risk factors are commercial in nature. And if you think about the way that we structure tech startups today, they're mostly always really, really heavy in technologists. And then you look at the results at the end, and 90% of the success factors, or failure factors actually, are commercially related. That's interesting to me. And I think that there are things that we can do. I think that's actually very good news, that only 10% of your failures are related to technology. It's not better technology that we need. Our technology is good enough. I think what we need is better commercialization. That's where IC Squared comes in. That's what they have been able to bring. And frankly, I'm a huge fan of IC Squared, obviously. I spent a lot of time there. And I learned an awful lot about that. And it created in me this constant desire to understand how to make this process, this cycle, this virtuous cycle of taking this raw material called human thought, converting it to technology, and then driving it into the marketplace where wealth is created. And that's an important point that I want to make, is that the wealth is only created when it's driven successfully into the marketplace. That's why we call it technology commercialization. And so that's a key thing for me. And that's one of the things as I think ahead, and to answer Nirankar's question over the next 3 to 5 years, what would I want to see happen for India? I would like to see India deliver technology startups at an 87% failure rate, or at an 80, or ideally at a 50% failure rate. Think about what that would mean. The capital not lost due to risky investments. How do we reduce the risk? Incubation is one way, and we should pursue that adamantly. But I think we should also think about how we change entrepreneurship education. We should think about how we set up startups. For instance, why do we always set up startups where they're almost 100% populated by technologists? If 90% of the failure factors are related to commercial issues, why don't we invent this new position called a commercialist? And why don't we take a bright young MBA student and team him up with these bright scientific students to go do the hard work of putting in place a more well-rounded team that can attack this problem as we understand it now, where 10% of the failures are related to technology and 90% are related to commercial issues. That's a question I ask. The promised land, and you heard this earlier on one of the other panels, nothing really good happens until you have established attraction in the marketplace. The promised land for a technology startup is a paying customer in a viable market. And the challenge should be for us to make sure that we have a clear path to the market before we begin to spend huge sums of money to go finalize and prove in technologies. We should be very clear about the fact that what you're building is going to actually be received well in the marketplace before we commit ourselves to the human and financial capital that it takes to actually spin up a startup. That's the challenge that I see before us. How do we do that? I think the way we do that is we change the way that we approach startups somewhat. Now, here's the typical way we do it. Somebody's got a great idea. They go write a business case, they go try to get some funding, they go build a prototype, and then they go test it in the marketplace. Bang. That's the 90% solution that we've talked about. And this is the common wisdom that we follow pretty much in all of the startup manuals. And this is how we teach it. So if you do the same thing that everybody else is doing, you're going to get the same result that they're all getting. I suggest that we take a slightly different approach, and that we put a lot of energy up front in trying to validate what our problem is. What problem are you trying to solve? Validate that. And when I say validate it, I mean do two things. Number one, figure out that the problem is really real. That's how you avoid building something the market doesn't care about. And number two, is the problem really a worthwhile problem to solve? By that I mean, can you sell it in the marketplace for a profitable transaction? There are so many problems in the world, and so many people come up with great ideas that, man, I could fix this problem. And they get to the end and they say, yeah, it's a real problem, but they're not willing to buy it because they have a good alternative solution. And one of the things we learned at IC Squared is, what are the alternatives that would prevent someone from using your solution? Very often the solution, the alternative, is to do nothing because there's not enough pain around it. So what I would suggest is that we begin with the problem. And then we move into the technology phase. We talk about, okay, so now that we understand that this is a real problem, and we really understand who the customer is and how he transacts and where he's at and how to reach him in a marketplace, then we start thinking about how our technology would solve that problem. Now this is a little bit backwards from the way that we do it today. And this is a little bit a little awkward for perhaps technology-only teams to deal with it, because most of those guys are really focused, and I've done this. I have done it the old way and launched a startup and had it fail because I built something, guess what, that the market thought was interesting but wasn't willing to buy. Sorry, I speak from experience. But if we started with a problem and then validated that the problem was real, and then begin to lay on things like we validated then that our technology will actually solve that problem, we're very good at that. And IC Squared has some excellent processes and procedures and frameworks to do that. They're very good at that. And only then, once we know we've got a real problem, we know how to reach those guys in their markets, in their very specific markets, whether it's a market within India where we're trying to solve a rural development type of a problem, or whether it's trying to reach a very technical market in Germany or the United States. We would still need to do the same thing. I would say that the way that we traditionally build a startup team today is we surround ourselves with the right technologists. And you can look around and it's very, very seldom that you find a commercialist in the middle of that team. So that's one thing we have to think about how we change that, is where do we get the commercialists to come in and do some of that early groundwork to help us decide if we've really got a real problem. So we would validate the technology. Then, once you understand that, you have pretty much everything you need to build a really viable, really strong business case. The business case that says, I know what the market is, I know how to get to that market, this is what it's going to take, this is how much it's going to cost. Only then do you go to the marketplace and you go to the capital markets and ask them for capital. Because then at that point, it's going to be an easy sell. And that typically what will happen is I believe funding will find you. Because venture capitalists, frankly, are not interested in our technologies. They don't invest in technology. They invest in business solutions. They want to invest in viable businesses. And so when you go to them with that, that gives you the opportunity to have a lot more leverage and to sell your idea more as a complete solution. So to move to close, so what I would say is I think that going forward, I would encourage us, if we're looking for a more successful startup regime in India, I would suggest that we shift our education of entrepreneurs, including at the university level and also within our incubation systems, that we focus on making sure that we have valid problems before we begin to move forward with the technology. Number two, I believe in order for us to be able to do that effectively, we really need to bring together with the technologists, a strong flavor of commercialists. And that's a term that I've kind of coined a little bit, and I use it often, commercialist. There's a pride in being a technologist. You know, there are many technologists in the room. That's a great source of pride. We should develop the same kind of capability in the business aspect of these startups, because at the end of the day, a startup is nothing more than a launch vehicle for a new product or service. It's a business. It's really about, a startup is a business, and we need more commercial thought in it up front. And that's how we close the gap on that 90% failures, or the 90% failures of failure factors around commercial issues. And then I think we also have to bring into place and improve some success-based funding. And there may be some opportunities for us to create some new funding models. There's lots of new innovation around funding going on in the United States. It's not clear whether things like crowdsourcing are going to solve more problems than they create, but there's a lot of people trying to find solutions. My point would be, as you develop this and build better startups from the ground up, you'll find that the funding is a lot easier to achieve. So I'll leave you with one final thought, and I touched on this before. What if in the next 3 to 5 years there in CAR, that we collectively as a team found a way to help Indian startups succeed at the rate of 15% as a beginning? What if we set a goal that said our programs are going to succeed at 5 points better than the world's best standard, and go build the models and the infrastructure, the innovation and entrepreneurship infrastructure it takes to make that happen? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing. Ladies and gentlemen, we are running a bit late of the session, but I am open for 5 questions for our panelists. You can raise your hand, identify yourself, and ask the question to any of the panelists before we close.
Good afternoon. My name is Tony John. The question is to Mr. Radhakrishnan. We were hearing in the earlier session the aspect.
Yeah, Brahmos, when you listen to that story of Mishra when he gave out, it has got both the way that how the government can enter into doing business. But today, that generally people telling government should get out of doing business. Government should not be the business of doing business. That is the mantra of government now. Fortunately, they came out with an innovative model, so they are neither government nor public sector. That's why the 49.5% stakeholding was an innovation in forming a company. Yes, it's a good model to emulate, but only thing we have to identify specific areas where we can bring in that kind of a partnership. So there has to be some, you have to have a partnership with equal proportions, I think. So you have to identify. Once you are able to identify areas where you can bring in those onto the table, equivalent to your partner. Because after all, once a company gets formed, the revenue is getting shared. You are going to share the revenue in the same proportion. That's how the stakeholder. You can't bring very low-end thing and then somebody is high-end and then you ask to have that kind of a partnership. It doesn't work. So you have to be selective. Wherever you feel there's an opportunity is there, we can emulate and multiply those kind of models. It's possible now.
Thank you. FICCI, DRDO, and IC Square is working in commercializing DRDO technologies in the commercial interest. They are about to start a program with Government of Andhra Pradesh, Government of Karnataka, Government of Rajasthan, and Government of Telangana very shortly.
Yeah. In fact, we have opened 4 university innovation facilitation centers across the country. One we have opened at Amity University, one we have opened at All India Institute of Medical Science, one we have opened at NIT Silchar, and one more somewhere in West Bengal. Yes, every year we open such kind of centers, depending upon the maturity and the kind of R&D intensity the institutions they are having. So we are open to opening such kind of institutions so that the industry, academia, and NRDC interactions will improve. Yeah.
Last question, please.
To innovate certain equipment which is in demand may not have done similar supply. So I would request, as a policy, the government should see that this is a homegrown technology. You come here, prove your technology, give us on-site repair, replace facility, which we can do, and not be blocked by those CVC guidelines that translates to us. It's very difficult for us to beat that obstacle.
Will you reply? Yeah, please.
Recently, the government procurement policy for SMEs was circulated for amendment. They are bringing some amendments to the policy. In fact, the policy has come to us also for our comments. So we have precisely what you said on the same problem we also pointed out. Saying that for Indian innovative systems, technologies, entrepreneurs, startups, there should be a different kind of a criteria. They should not ask, they should have a 2 crores turnover in the last 2 years, because it's by definition it's a startup. So they may not be having that kind of a credentials. So we requested Government of India to put a liberal pre-eligibility or pre-screening criteria.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, with these, I'd like to close the session because we have to commence the next session. And before we close, one very important, I think, input, which I would ask my coordinator to record. They should give a recommendation to the government to create a low-cost returnable capital pipeline to build a startup and convert some of their government grant schemes. The grant which government is giving in, which is non-returnable, they should kindly create a structure for creating low-cost returnable capital pipeline. And one initiative which industry body we should definitely recommend to Ministry of Corporate Affairs, the 2% CSR, it should offset to bank interest for startups. That means if a startup is drawing any bank limit or bank loan, he should be provided this loan at very concessional interest rate. And this complete corpus should be set up by the corporate CSR activity. So with these 2 words, and I must thank my panelists, Mr. Kamath, for his leadership in the country. I'd like to thank Mr. Radhakrishnan, Dr. Purushottam, Mr. Chad, welcome to India, and I think India will look forward to work with you in transforming this. Our great partner, Mr. Sid Babak, my dear friend Len Denton, and with these words, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Keeping with the tradition at FICCI, I would like to discuss and request Mr. Nirikat Saxena to present mementos to all the distinguished panelists sitting on the dais. To Mr. Shad, Dr. Kamath, Mr. Sid Babak, Mr. Radhakrishnan, Mr. Purushottam, Mr. Len Denton,
Yeah, so one group photograph I think you can take, and then we'll record.
Technology which is available at some place, they do not know what to do with that technology.
For innovation to be successful, someone has to take a note of positive.
Because we get to be here in India when there's so much dynamism and so much happening and so much growth happening here.